It's hard to imagine now standing under the night sky, looking up at that pale, glowing sphere in the heavens, and realizing that human beings, fragile and flawed, have actually walked on it. Walking on the moon is more than a line in a history book. It's the story of how curiosity, courage, sacrifice, and pure human determination carried us beyond Earth's cradle into the silent vacuum of space. The very idea seemed impossible not long ago. For centuries, the moon was a symbol of mystery, magic, poetry, and madness. Ancient civilizations worshipped it, philosophers contemplated it, artists painted it, poets wrote verses to it. But it remained forever out of reach, a distant light in the sky, untouchable and unknowable. That all changed on July 20th, 1969, when Neil Armstrong, commander of Apollo 11, descended the fragile metal ladder of the lunar module and stepped onto the moon's dusty surface, uttering the immortal words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." But this moment, which echoed around the Earth, was not the beginning of the story. It was the climax of a long and perilous journey that began in the minds of dreamers, scientists and visionaries who dared to think that the sky was not the limit. This is not just the story of one mission or one astronaut. It's the story of what it took for the human race to reach another world. It begins in the Cold War era, a time of political tension and ideological rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. In 1957, the Soviets shocked the world by launching Sputnik, the first artificial satellite. The tiny metal sphere beeped its way around Earth, proving that the USSR had the technology to potentially send weapons through space. America, stunned and embarrassed, responded by igniting a space race that would soon become one of the most intense scientific competitions in history. Just 4 years later, the Soviets sent the first human, Yuri Gagarin, into space. The U.S. was falling behind, and it needed a bold response. Enter President John F. Kennedy. In 1961, he stood before Congress and declared that America would put a man on the moon before the decade was out, not because it was easy, but because it was hard. His words ignited a national obsession. NASA, then a young agency, was given a mission of almost unimaginable difficulty: to land humans on the moon and return them safely to Earth. The Apollo program was born. It would require the work of over 400,000 people, billions of dollars in funding, the creation of brand new technologies, and thousands of hours of high-risk testing. The risks were real. The Mercury and Gemini programs came first, teaching NASA how to send astronauts into orbit, how to maneuver in space, how to rendezvous and dock spacecraft, how to prepare for something no one had ever done before. Behind the scenes, engineers worked tirelessly, building rockets, modules, and life support systems. Mathematicians, many of them women, and many of them African American, like the now celebrated Katherine Johnson, calculated trajectories by hand, without the help of modern computers. Every part of the mission had to be perfect, because failure meant death. Then came Apollo 1. In 1967, 3 astronauts, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee, died in a horrific fire during a pre-launch test. The nation mourned. The program paused. Investigations were launched. Changes were made. And yet, the mission continued. Human beings were not ready to give up on the moon. Each successive Apollo mission brought NASA closer to their goal. Apollo 7 tested the command module in Earth's orbit. Apollo 8 made the daring journey around the moon and back, with astronauts seeing the far side of the moon for the first time. Apollo 9 tested the lunar module. Apollo 10 did everything but land. Then, in July 1969, Apollo 11 launched from Kennedy Space Center atop the mighty Saturn V rocket, the most powerful machine ever built by human hands. On board were Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. 3 men carried the hopes of an entire world. The journey took just over 3 days. After entering lunar orbit, Armstrong and Aldrin transferred into the Lunar Module Eagle and began their descent. Collins remained alone in the Command Module Columbia, circling the Moon. As the Eagle descended, Armstrong noticed that their planned landing site was littered with boulders. With fuel running low and alarms blaring, he took manual control of the spacecraft and guided it to a safer spot. When the Eagle finally touched down, Armstrong calmly announced, "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." The world erupted in applause, cheers, tears. And yet, the real moment was still to come. Hours later, Armstrong descended the ladder. The cameras captured his boot pressing into the lunar dust surface, untouched for billions of years until that exact moment. Buzz Aldrin followed, describing the view as magnificent desolation. They spent over 2 hours walking on the Moon, collecting samples, taking photographs, setting up experiments. They planted an American flag, not as a symbol of conquest, but of achievement. They left behind a plaque that read, "We came in peace for all mankind." Back on Earth, over 600 million people watched live the largest audience for any broadcast in human history. In homes, schools, and public squares around the world, people stared at black and white screens in disbelief. It was no longer science fiction. Human beings had truly walked on another world. But what was it like? What does it feel like to walk on the Moon? The astronauts described it as both alien and strangely familiar. The gravity is 1/6 of Earth's, making movement feel slow and exaggerated, like bouncing. The surface is dusty and gray, with no air, no sound, no life. The sun is blinding, the shadows pitch black. It is utterly silent. And yet, Armstrong and Aldrin felt no fear in those moments only wonder, only purpose. They were not just walking for themselves, but for all of humanity. After just over 21 hours on the surface, they returned to the Eagle, launched back into orbit, docked with Columbia, and began the journey home. When Apollo 11 splashed down in the Pacific Ocean, a chapter in history was sealed forever. But walking on the Moon did not end there. 5 more missions followed Apollo 12, 14, 15, 16, and 17. Each brought new astronauts, new experiments, new insights. They drove rovers, they explored valleys and craters. They brought back rocks older than any on Earth. In total, 12 men have walked on the Moon. All were American. All were trained pilots. All faced death and chose discovery. But after Apollo 17 in 1972, the mission stopped. Budgets were cut. Public interest faded. No human has walked on the Moon since. And yet, the footprints are still there, preserved in dust, untouched by wind or rain, a permanent reminder of what we once dared to do. In the decades since, the Moon has remained both a memory and a goal. New missions are planned. NASA's Artemis program promises to return humans to the Moon this time, including the first woman and the first person of color. Other nations are joining to China, India, Europe. Even private companies like SpaceX are eyeing lunar exploration. Walking on the Moon was never just about science. It was about showing what humanity is capable of when united by purpose. It was about facing the impossible and making it real. It was about dreaming of something bigger than ourselves. And today, as we look forward to returning to the Moon, we remember that this isn't just history, it's a challenge. A challenge to dream again, to build again, to explore again. Because walking on the Moon wasn't the end of the story, it was only the beginning. The real question is, what's our next step?